good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm very thrilled and honored to have with me as my guest Brent Hawkins, who's a partner at Morgan Lewis. Brent, welcome to the program.
Hi, good morning. How are you, Richard? Good to see you.
Well, Brent, you are officially the last podcast of 2022.
Hope to close it out. I hope to close out the year great for you.
So let me start by asking you, I see you were an engineer. I was an engineer also. What made you decide to go to law school in the first place?
Yeah, my choice to go to engineering was a strange one. I was kind of talked into it with encouragement from my parents. And while I enjoyed it, I did not envision myself being an engineer full time. It didn't kind of speak to me or exercise some of the skills that I much prefer to exercise in life. And I had a mechanical background, and I don't know that I was a good enough engineer to be on the design side, which is the cool side. And I saw myself kind of being more of a plant engineer, systems engineer. And and in engineering school, that's how I interned, and didn't exactly fit me or speak to me. And went to a very good friend of mine at the time. It was I was little upset, despondent about the notion of possibly spending my career as an engineer, but liked the notion of technology and wanted to, still put it to use. And she said to me, well, I'm going to be a patent lawyer. And quite frankly, I had no idea what that was. I don't come from a family of lawyers, first generation lawyer, and had no real understanding of the patent system. And she diligently sent me a bunch of materials, and I read, and I quickly went to my employer at the time and said, hey, do we have a patent department? They said, yeah. Sent me out, talked to it, and from that point on, I knew that I wanted to be an IP lawyer and a patent lawyer in particular.
Interesting. Now, when you got to law school, obviously it was very different from being an engineer. Well, how did you like it? Was it love at first sight, or you?
Yeah,
I
actually really enjoyed my law school, my time in law school. I actually found, and I still find, more similarities in law school than I think than a lot of people at least identify. I think you're working with a set of puzzle pieces. You have a problem, and you're constrained by, in engineering, you may be constrained a bit by math and science. In the law, you're constrained by the law, by precedent. And so you have to work with the facts that you have within the constraints of kind of the parameters set out by the law. So I quickly found that similarity, but I like the idea of being creative within those parameters. So within that box, the idea that it'd be a little more creative with arguments, how to take the pieces, put them together in a way, both the facts and the law, that was convincing. So on the litigation side, I found that compelling. So in my advocacy classes, I really enjoy that. And I like the philosophical bit. Oddly, as an engineer, I tended to really enjoy the philosophical approach to legal solutions and the history of law. So I enjoyed my legal career. I went on and taught as an adjunct professor for many, many years at my alma mater, and so I enjoyed it that much.
Now, you obviously ended up in a career in litigation. Did you ever think about doing some transactional work? Did that ever come across your desk, or think about that?
So actually, I'm primarily a litigation trial lawyer, but I still do manage patent prosecution. In fact, throughout most of my career, I've had a steady balance of litigation, prosecution, and transactional work, patent, prep and pros. I started at a small boutique in Chicago many years ago, and small boutiques at that time, in that environment, you had to do everything. So I did everything from patent and trademark prep and pros to litigation to transactional support. So and that kind of informed my career from that point until until now. I mean, I admit most of my practice now is litigation and trial work, and most of the prosecution side that I still do is kind of managing and overseeing and reviewing and editing prep and pros work. But it has always been a part of my practice, as well as deal work and advising on acquisitions and divestitures of assets and that kind of work.
That makes sense. Well, tell me a little bit of give me a feel for the kind of range of technologies you worked on. I'm sure you've worked on a lot of different kinds, but give me a feel for that.
Yeah, I've done everything from mechanical gadgets and things like seats and furniture to cellular technology, wireless technology and infrastructure, to hardware, to electrical hardware, software, all the way to pharmaceutical work. I've done some Hatch-Waxman work. I tend to settle around the mechanical, electromechanical arts, though I've had a broad range. And I've done quite a bit of work in the automotive space, whether it's with suppliers, tier one suppliers to car manufacturers or for the car manufacturers themselves. So I've got a pretty broad range of technology experiences, but my sweet spot tends to be in the mechanical, electromechanical, software space, and a lot around the wireless counseling and standard essential patent work in the wireless space as well.
What is the most complicated technology you've had to wrestle with, would you say, if you can remember one?
Well, complicated in terms of technology with which I'm most familiar is probably been in the cellular space. Some of that work. Complicated in terms of a reach beyond my technological expertise is some of the chemistry in the pharmaceutical work, particularly the compounds, and where I'm absolutely out of my depth in terms of my own practical experience with the technology. But I quite frankly, I found some of that to be, and the wireless to be some of the most fascinating. And one of the things I love about what I do is learning. While I was an engineer, I haven't engineered anything in years, and nor would you want me to, I don't think. But what I do appreciate is kind of I appreciate the subtleties, and I appreciate learning new technologies and learning from the true experts, true inventors or technologists. So that's one of the things I actually enjoy about what I do. So
now, do you find that clients and experts, do you think they appreciate that, or do they recognize that you have an engineering background? Like, does that help in your dialogue with them?
I think it does. Some almost require it in order to have a discussion with you. But I think most importantly, what it helps with is kind of the ability to not be intimidated by by the technology, whatever the technology is, whether it's something I'm somewhat familiar with, or some of the technologies we just talked about that I'm ultimately not as familiar with. I'm not intimidated by the dialogue. And so I'm able to engage, I think, a little more readily. And I think that becomes apparent when you're talking to someone, some of the inventors or the technologists that you're talking about, or scientists, when you're not intimidated by the discussion, and you're able then to contribute pretty quickly. So I think that's where my engineering background has been, has helped me the most in the practice, is that ability to walk into the discussion without being intimidated, and then to take the complex ideas and then translate it to a person who maybe is less apt at that particular technology, or at any technology at all, and then translate it to them in a way that's understandable, bite-sized, makes more real-world sense.
Now, of all the various aspects of litigation which you do, I'm sure you do all ends of it, do you have kind of a favorite part? Do you like the trial work best? Do you like the strategy part the best? What part?
Well, I would say everybody plays for the Super Bowl, which is the trial. That is the most fun. But I do like the strategic counseling around it, and really problem solving. If you're short of the Super Bowl,
Yeah, yeah.
kind of managing the client through the resolution of a dispute, the strategy around that, putting them in a position to come out on the other side in a way that they can still go about a productive business. And so I do enjoy the kind of the strategic counseling. I also like the in-game litigation strategies, finding the evidence, finding the correct or nuanced area of the law, or that one little fine piece of evidence that you've been searching for, and all of a sudden it's there in front of you, and kind of the tides change where you've been backpedaling. You all of a sudden are on the offensive. That's obviously a fun part of what I do, and an enjoyable part. But again, I think most litigators who want to be trial lawyers like the trial, because that's the that is the Super Bowl, So it's speaking at the right time of the year, the end of the football season.
Totally. So you've obviously had a fantastic career as a litigator. Have you ever thought about doing something in-house? Has that ever, thought about that? Is that ever something you think you might do in the future? What are your thoughts on that?
I think at this point, I really love what I'm doing. I like the challenges of different clients with different needs and different technology areas. And they're so disparate when you're outside counsel, right? I mean, while I recognize that in-house counsel have served their own clients, there's often an overarching objective, corporate objective, or departmental objective, whereas I have one client over here now as outside counsel that has a completely different business objective than one over here, who maybe position themselves to be sold, or for an IPO, or to introduce a brand new technology. So I enjoy that part of being outside counsel. That being said, I do find and admire some of the challenges that my friends and colleagues that are in-house counsel have, being a part of the business team, particularly at the more executive leadership levels, where you're involved with where you're not just being the lawyer, you're also providing or using your legal background to provide a perspective to the company on its corporate objectives. I do admire that. That is something that has always been interesting to me, and even as outside counsel, to the extent I get to be involved in those type of opportunities to present to a board or the executive leadership team or an audit committee, and in certain instances, the ability to step into that role is attractive. And when you ask me what one of the things I really like about what I do, I like those opportunities to be in that role, or to assist the in-house counsel in that role. So a long answer to your short question: if an in-house role in which those opportunities arose, where it was a true engagement with the business, those are interesting opportunities to me, and I enjoy that perspective as outside counsel as well.
Is there any area of technology or any type of case that you haven't tried or worked on that you would love to still do in the future? Is anything like your burning desire to, learn a certain technology or anything like that?
I've been fortunate enough to pretty much touch on at least the big food groups. There may be I would like to do a little more medical device work than I've done in the past. I did quite a bit on the prep and process side at one point in my career, but to litigate it, I think some of the issues that arise that overlap, particularly in the regulated medical device or medical devices, is interesting. But I also think that the technologies are so important societally, and understanding kind of development and growth and protections around those technologies, to me, is interesting, exciting. So if I had to pick one, perhaps that would be it. But like I said, I've been fortunate enough to kind of have had an experience across a broad way of technologies, and both within traditional IP practices and kind of ancillary practices, contracts cases or licensing cases that I've been in, disputes that I've been in which I've been involved, where I've gotten to touch on some interesting areas of technology, even if it wasn't a true patent dispute.
What do your parents think about the fact that you turned your engineering degree into a law degree?
Now they are absolutely ecstatic about it. I will tell a story. I actually didn't tell my parents that I was interested in going to law school until I took the LSAT, I think almost in secret. I took it, I passed it, I was interviewing for jobs, and then I finally broke into my dad that, I'm going to go to law school. I mean, I think I almost lost him right there. He had no idea. What are you talking about? You're an engineer. We spent all this money on engineering, invested in this, and you're going to go be a lawyer? There's a ton of lawyers out there. I mean, that was his, and he had no concept of intellectual property law, patent law. And so, I think because of his ignorance of that area, had he been more informed about that area, he might have been a little more excited rather than me having to resuscitate him and bring him back into the living from telling him that I wasn't going on to be an engineer. But now they are quite happy, and they recognize that I love what I do. I love my practice. That my father's always been both my parents, but my father is very much of a preacher of, you have to love what you do. And if you're not doing what you love, then it's time to move on. And so he sees that, and he also finds what I do to be pretty fascinating now that he's gotten a firmer understanding of my career choice. But at the time, I almost lost a dad. The heart attack.
That's funny. Well, Brent, this has been a wonderful conversation. I do a lot of these interviews, and I can always tell when somebody really does love what they do, and I totally felt that today, and I just, really enjoyed it, and I appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Richard. Appreciate it, and thank you for having me on as your last guest of the year. So happy holidays, if that's appropriate for the podcast.
Absolutely. This is Richard Hsu and Brent Hawkins. Thanks.
Take care.